Okay, hey everyone. Welcome to the Women of Ring podcast. Today we have my friend Jess Pombo here with us. I think we're going to have a really cool conversation. So, just to give you guys a little bit of background, Jess and I have known each other for we've known each other for years.
Long time now.
But we yeah, but we've just started to actually train together, get to know each other a little bit better. And Jess is one of those people that I have a very easy time sitting around and having a 4 or 5 hour conversation. The conversations can go anywhere from dog training to health to, conspiracy theories.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, we can talk about so many things. So I'm super excited to have her on. Before I get into a lot of talking, I actually just want to ask Jess, just introduce yourself, tell people a couple things that, maybe they don't know about you, but that you feel comfortable sharing.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Jess. I'm one half of Sonoma County Canine that I own with my partner, Sarah. We've got a couple dogs that we do ring sport with. We run our pet dog company out of Santa Rosa here in California. Some things about me that people may not know. I've really recently gotten, like you mentioned, really into fitness. So that's kind of where I've been spending a lot of my extra time and sort of my extra obsessions. But yeah.
Nice. That's all you want to share?
That's all I got so far. I gotta pull a little more out of me.
Yeah, we'll have other stuff come up, of course, during the course of the conversation. So this was interesting. I'm sure you're not expecting me to ask you about this, but I noticed when we were texting, some people have their photos set. And so whenever I get a text message from you or something, it shows up as a lotus flower. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Why did you choose a lotus flower?
That's actually really funny. So when Apple first came out with their products, you had to choose some kind of login icon for your computer, right? So if you had we had a family computer, so everyone had a profile. So we each were just choosing sort of random icons, and I sort of always gravitated towards that. And even though Apple has changed what icons you can select, they've always kept that one, and I just kept choosing that one over and over. And it was actually something that I really wanted to get tattooed as my first tattoo when I was younger, but I had never really committed to it because I was sort of trying to tie in certain times of my life with the way that I felt about certain things, and I was never sort of ready to commit to that one, but I had always kept it as my icon to sort of remind me of what I felt like I was sort of trying to achieve from an internal perspective. So
Nice.
I just sort of hung on to it. I didn't realize until more recently that now everyone could potentially see.
Yes, everybody can see it. So, as you know, I grew up in a Buddhist organization, and the lotus flower has a lot of symbolism in Buddhism. And so that's why it stood out to me, because normally, if it's some flower, I have no idea what it is. I'm going to be like, oh, they have a flower. But there are two things that we talked about a lot in the Buddhist organization about the lotus flower. And the first is that the lotus flower blooms in a muddy swamp. And so it is, it's similar to a person being able to attain enlightenment in this world, right? The world is a bit of a muddy swamp, if you will.
No doubt.
But people can shine, can attain enlightenment, can achieve, absolute happiness without having to leave. And that's one thing that, differentiates that form of Buddhism from many forms of Buddhism, where in order to attain enlightenment, you leave, you retreat to a mountainside where it's quiet and you don't have to deal with everyday life. And then the other thing about the lotus flower is that it has these, I call them bristles, but that's not actually what they're called because they're spikes. But these spikes on the lotus flower actually like that pushes the mud off of them. So when you see the lotus flower, it's in this muddy swamp, but the lotus flower itself is always beautiful. It never looks muddy. And that's because
Wow.
it's got these like, little protective bristles that keep it looking spiffy. So, but it like in the context of Buddhism, that also represents like our ability to be unsullied.
Yeah.
Like we can actually achieve enlightenment, but not sort of carry the baggage of the stuff around us. So
I feel like really attached to that big time. I think that's something that I've been really trying to put into practice maybe within the last 2 years or so, of just trying to be a little more open and trying to really understand like what's important, and to keep my focuses on those things and sort of let the noise, if you will, sort of just kind of wash over me. So that's
nice.
definitely something I feel like I've definitely been working on. It's a good reminder.
Well, you've had that reminder like right in front of your face.
I know, that's why I think it's actually really funny that I feel like life has a way of exposing you to things sort of at the right time. And like you said, it's sort of been my icon, gosh, since my very first Apple product. So, I'm aging myself a little there, but it's cool. I like
That's
that.
awesome. Yeah, when I tell you my my stepdad had one of those like the old school like original Apple computer.
The
You
ones
wanna
where they're
talk
like
about
clear, they came in like different colors, or like bubbly.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we'll both be aging ourselves here in a second.
I love it.
So I have some things that I wrote that I kind of want to talk about with you, and if there are things that you want to talk about, we can jump in. But one of the first things I want to ask you to talk about is raising a very intense dog.
Yeah.
So so you can tell everybody just about your journey. Like I'm really interested because it's funny to train together and like, I'll work Stasia. Who's like Stasia's just like she comes out, she does the thing. Like there's some intensity in there, but it's not, she's more internal. It's definitely not like bubbling over the top. And so then you come out with narwhal, and like the contrast between the two, just it cracks me up all the time. But a lot of people are raising dogs like narwhal, and when I watch you train, it always strikes me how calm and consistent you are. You really try to break things down. You think a lot about how what you're doing in one training session is gonna like translate to what happens on a trial field. And it looks to me like you're sort of deconstructing and thinking of like, in some ways, like the worst case scenarios, right? Like, what's the worst case scenario? My dog can break the line. My dog can leave me for the decoy, in the defense. My dog can do this. And I think that we're all thinking about that in a lot of ways when we're training. But when you have a dog that has a lot of intensity, I think that comes to the surface a bit more.
Yeah.
This is what I think. So that comes to the surface more, and you feel like there's a lot more that I need to sort of train, if you will, and break down and put together. So I'd be very interested for you to just talk about the process, and also like, are you enjoying it?
Yeah.
Is it enjoyable? Is it less enjoy? Like who? I mean, you've raised multiple dogs, and so I'd be interested in that comparison too.
Yeah, definitely. So just to give a little background on my current dog, Narwhal, he's almost 3. He'll be 3 in September. He is, for those of you guys that are interested in pedigrees and things like that, he's an Annihilator Disco son. I love him very much. I think he's as a dog, I think he's fantastic. He's really sweet. He's very loving. He's proven to be pretty easygoing in the house, and he's social with other dogs. Environmentally, I haven't had any issues with him there, taking him to public spaces or traveling. You've actually boarded him now that I had to travel. That was such a relief, especially kind of having a more intense dog. But he's, he's a good guy. But on the field, he's definitely excited to be there. And what I mean by excited, like obviously, the Malinois are really amped to do the things that, we have bred them to do. But he in particular, he really wears his excitement on the outside, and it comes out as very high energy. Like I think there's a difference, I think, between describing a dog as high drive and then there's high energy, right? So obviously there's different levels to all of those things, low, medium, high for both. And I think high drive are the dogs that are very wanting to do it. Like I think your dog is very high drive. She's very motivated to do the things, but she's not very high energy on the field, right? Like she comes out, she looks like she's doing exactly what her job is. She's not expending any more energy than she needs to. Even watching her run her blinds, like she literally like does her job. She trots down the field, checks every single one. She really does her part, and her entries are really nice, but she doesn't look very, very high energy. And I think with Narwhal, he's very high drive, he's very exuberant, and he very much wants to do those things, but he's also incredibly high energy, probably the highest energy Malinois I have ever had, with maybe the exception of one female that I can talk about, and she happened to be the smallest Mal I've ever had, and he happens to be the smallest male, so I don't know if maybe there's something to do with it. I don't know, but again, like he just wears a lot of his excitement on the outside. So if I'm going to set up for a face attack, I see him really, spun up and cranked up, really excited to go, and he really shows it. His body's vibrating, and I can do my part by trying to balance it. And with him, sending him to bite is never really a question. I don't really have a lot of concern about what's going to happen when he finally gets to the decoy. I don't worry that he's going to have a sensitive moment. And you mentioned that I've raised other dogs, and I have had in the past more sensitive dogs that I've had to do a lot more building in the bite work. And with Narwhal, I haven't had to do any building really, outside of obviously teaching him how to do the things. He does his part and he shows up and he does the bite work, but my time now is spent on basically the brakes of all of it, right? Like the gas pedal is no problem. Like now it's about kind of maintaining the picture, and I try to train with the end goal in mind, right? If trialing at the highest level of, our sport that I train with him is French ring. So I want to make sure that I'm sort of preparing for what's going to happen at level 3. The expectation is for us to come out onto the field for about a 45-minute routine or so with no rewards, no equipment, very minimal communication. You're only allotted the things that you're permitted to do within each exercise. And I'm trying now, like he does his part, like he bites and he does all of his exercises. But now my real balancing act is making sure that he's going to wait for me and make sure that, he's going to follow those commands. So kind of, going back to the face attack picture, like I have no doubt that the moment I tell him to go bite, that he's going to go. And thankfully, the control itself is really straightforward. It's very uncommon that I have like a serious outing issue or a recall issue. Those things are balanced relatively easily. But for him, it's the start line. Definitely, I down him and I see his whole body shaking and vibrating. And, I honk the horn and he's there sort of ready to go. And, although he's holding himself, I've tried to make it a point to not send him when he's thinking about going, and trying to create these patterns of like, hey, buddy, like I'm going to wait until you're sort of in a better frame of mind before I send you. And, we've done this a couple times in some of the sessions together where I honk the horn and I kind of wait until I see him sink back into the down and he's no longer shaking before I send him. And then I'll have other sessions where I obviously have to incorporate a lot of handler rewards, which I think is very uncommon for more sensitive dogs, like dogs that need to be built more. In the bite work, I wasn't spending as much time on the control. That part never felt difficult. Like it never felt like I had to do anything special in terms of decoy neutralization. Like I could just walk them on the field and they'd be like, okay, cool. Like, what are we going to do? Okay, you want me to bite? Like, cool. Now I have my toy. They felt a lot more engaged with me organically. And it could have been that maybe the value of the decoy wasn't as high, right? Like if there were question marks for them when they got there, maybe being with me obviously had its perks too. And with narwhal, I'm trying to find that balance of, obviously the decoy is going to be the higher value thing, and how I can just be consistent about, how can I get the correct frame of mind? How can I get him to go from like, oh man, I really want to go, I really want to bite, I really want to do this thing, to go to accepting the rules. And I want to do it in a way that's cooperative. I don't want to bring the hammer down all the time, but I need to make sure that I can implement training strategies that are ultimately going to help him, but also help me achieve my goals. So something I take a lot of thought into is the skills that I work on at home. Like there's always a bunch of stuff to work on, right? It's a lot to kind of keep track of, but I'll isolate some of the skills I think I'm maybe more behind in, or skills that will help me sort of calm him down before I get to the bite work. And I'll do those things at home to sort of create some kind of predictable ritual or set of expectations. And then I can take those skills, and then the days that I go to the training field, start to make those look like my more formal sessions. So I find that in these lower stimulating, lower arousing places, I can work on these like really, really fine-tuned skills without him even thinking that bite work is an option, right? I call it like my training lab. At home, I don't do bite work there. He sort of never expects it. So I'm also working with kind of a different dog, right? He's in a completely different frame of mind. So there we can do a lot of our real training, right? Like that's where all the learning is happening, a lot of the proofing. And I can create a criteria that I can take now to the field when we're going to do our formal sessions. And I try to make those sessions look as close to my home sessions as possible, while also sort of pushing the line a little bit. Like I know he's already going to be a little bit more aroused. He's always going to be a little bit more amped. And I used to, with my other dogs, I would split my obedience and my bite work sessions on the actual field. So I would come out, do my obedience just to make sure that, I would get them warmed in, get them dialed into the environment, take them off the field, and then bring them out as fresh as possible for the bite work. I really needed as much energy as I could get from them, because my fear was if they were tired, that the thing that bothered them in the bite work would be sort of too obvious, right? Their mind isn't totally on, they're a little bit more fatigued. So I used to separate everything. With him, I found the more I separated it, when I brought him out that second time, he was just like much more amped, much more like he knew, right? And he's really smart. He's such a smart dog, and he patterns really easily, which is what I want, right? We want that for sport. He patterns really easily, but he got really keen on, okay, bite work comes second. And I started to notice that, hey, these things that really worked for me with my previous dogs were really working against me with this more powerful dog. So that alone sort of made me re-strategize everything with him. Everything that I had been doing up until that point was trying to take these more sensitive dogs that had, some weaknesses here or there, and I was trying to lift them up in the work. And with him, it's sort of the opposite. He's really supplying everything that I would hope for, right? And now I'm going, okay, like how can I get this really powerful dog to like want to do this thing with me as cooperatively as possible? So that's sort of been our journey.
Yeah, and so now that you're having a different experience, what would you say? Or you don't even have to answer this question as I'm framing it. Like I'm interested in what you enjoy the most of, just preparing dogs for the trial field, but you can also talk about if you prefer the building versus the taking down. Right?
Yeah, it's really funny how you genuinely trade one thing for another. Like I'll sort of clump all of my more sensitive dogs into one dog that I really, really wanted to make work. Like I loved him as a dog. Like I thought he was just a really cool dog, and I really enjoyed training with him. His name is Cheddar. He's owned by I gave him to a student at the school, at the Michael school. So he lives with her now, and they're doing a little bit of mondioring. I've seen some training videos, and he looks like he's doing pretty well. But when I had him, I had originally focused on trying to do French ring. That was kind of at the time where I was shifting more, starting kind of my French ring journey. And I was going to try to do it with him. And I noticed that there were some sensitivities in the work, some issues with the stick. And I had a lot of people try to help me and try to kind of build the dog up, but I could tell that although like doing obedience with him was so fun, and I think I was also sort of at the height of my motivation and excitement, and I was really into it, and I was really into him, and I think at the time I thought I was really going to make it work with Cheddar, so I was trying, my best to kind of put the program together. And as I saw the bite work kind of fall apart, I started to realize the stress that I was feeling as a handler, that every time I would tell him to bite, I was sort of like, like, what's gonna, like, are you still gonna be there? Like, are you gonna be all right? Is today gonna be the day where it's sort of the end? So although I loved training with him, and the obedience didn't feel arduous for me at all, it didn't feel wildly complicated. He felt very straightforward. He was really powerful. I really liked the way he took pressure. He didn't really get active from pressure. He took it very smoothly. Like he was sort of the dog that I got to express the most of my training at that time. Like, it was maybe the furthest I had pushed a dog along in sport training. So I was enjoying that process a lot. But it was very stressful to do the bite work, that although as a decoy, I think the building is really fun. Like, it's really cool to see a dog kind of become empowered through the thing that they're afraid of, and you start to see the leaps and bounds, and the work is really active, and you tend to see a lot of growth. I think as a handler, it was sort of an emotional roller coaster to sort of be up sometimes and then really down sometimes, and then kind of always be told like, yeah, like you could do it, but like there are these maybes. And he's a lot older now, and I think dogs like that, giving them time to kind of grow up, probably would have done him some good. But I knew that with what goals I had, I needed a different dog. So although the building was really fun, and it didn't have a lot of stress in terms of my requirements, like it's really easy, right? Like, I just have to do my job and support my dog and kind of maintain the bits of control along the way. It was really hard to sort of hit that ceiling every now and then, and to kind of finally go, this is not really the journey that I want to take. I spent a lot of time trying to at minimum be somewhat competitive. I'm not trying to be wildly competitive, mostly just with myself. I wanted a dog that I could try to at least get a Ring 3 program going with, and kind of see where I was at with training. So that was a little hard. And with Narwhal, it's a totally different trade-off. I feel like the bite work stuff is so easy and so fast for him, but then I spend months trying to repair the control again. And it feels like such a balancing act to come out and go, whew, like, okay, I need to get my dog in the right frame of mind, and I need to curve all this extra energy. And with him, I actually have to spend a lot of time preparing to train, which is a little, for lack of a better word, kind of annoying. Like, it's kind of frustrating to not be able to just kind of pull him out and train. Like, it benefits me tremendously to take my time with everything. Like, from the moment I walk up to the crate and I open the door, and how I choose to interact with him there, and how I choose to let him exit the crate or even walk around before entering the field, I think really matters for him. And also trying to maintain that discipline of, I firmly believe that if I can't clearly communicate my expectations with him now, how do I expect him to really get it when we start to trial? Like, I don't think things need to be so extreme, but I try to be somewhat patterned when I'm actually at the training field. So at home, like, I can let go of a couple things, like maybe how he exits his crate or X-pen. I don't have to have the same requirements, but I also know that he's not thinking that he's going to be doing bite work. So I have that advantage. It's not like he's going to come out cranked the same way. Like, maybe he's excited to maybe go to the yard, but then maybe he sees that we're going to train. I can spend that energy in that session in a different way. So sometimes training on the field, like feeling like, oh man, maybe I could just pull him out really quick and, just run a couple blinds. I could never do that. That would be so bad for me to pull him out of the car and not do any bits of control or obedience and go, just bark. Like, just go in there and bark. So I've tried to find workarounds by going, okay, if I can't do that at the field, then maybe I can create stations for myself at home so I can work on isolated skills that won't require me to sort of drain the energy or curve it, or really need to bring him down. And what I mean by bring down is just bring down the excitement and internalize it. I want him to be happy. I want him to be excited to be there, but I need some of that energy to be sort of inwardly focused more so.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff in what you said. So I want to dive into a couple things and just talk, because I assume, just based on the interest that I've gotten about this podcast, like, lots of women are excited. I think there are a lot of women that are doing sports. There are a lot of women that are interested in sports but maybe haven't started doing sports yet. And so some of these ideas that you're talking about, I only wrote down 4 of them, but there are so many others. I could have been like taking notes for the entire time you were talking about different things, because those breakdowns are important. And I think when people first come into a sport, I know when I first started a sport, I was very lucky to have Lisa as a mentor, who could teach, and even with her as a mentor, like, she just was someone who, she wasn't really active in sports at the time, not the ring sports. She was very active at the time I met her in AKC sports,
Mhm.
but her level of experience was so broad, and she had accomplished incredible things in the ring sport. So that transition from pet dog training to sport dog training, which a lot of people struggle with, was so much easier because I had somebody there to hold my hand, essentially.
Yeah.
But I think that when it comes to sports, you either have people coming in who have not trained a dog ever, but they get really inspired about a dog sport. And that's, I mean, the learning curve in that is just, it's unbelievable. And that's not to say anything negative about anyone. It just, that's the reality. Like, you have to learn how to train a dog, basically, and then you have to learn how to train a dog for dog sports, which is a significantly higher level. Or you get people who are pet dog trainers and they get into training dogs for sport. And there's a lot of confusion there, because what we do for pet dogs is an entirely different world from what we do with sport dogs. The foundational concepts are the same, but just listening to you about, the patterns, the rhythms, routines, the way that you have to break things down, you don't necessarily need to do that. I think that a lot of what we do for pet dog training is the broken down form.
Yeah,
of,
definitely.
you know,
Definitely.
yeah. So it's like that part of it is so, like, I just think you hit so many nails on so many heads. And those are things, like, especially for people newer to sports, um, that I hope that you take in and start thinking about, because a lot of the concepts that the dogs need to understand for sports are, they're chained behaviors, but there's a level of generalization that needs to be done for some of the sports, that adds layers of complexity. And then, you have to think about each dog as an individual. And so what you do for one dog may not work for another. Like, there's just there it can be pretty complex.
It's
But
it's
there's,
a lot. It's a lot for
yeah,
sure.
like, a couple of the things that I wanted to talk about, and these are sort of personal things that I notice with a lot of people that I work with. You talked a lot about consistency and, keeping things consistent for narwhal, which I think it's important in training any dog, but especially in sports, like how we show up and present, what we communicate to our dogs, like, that part of consistency is so important. Like I'll have days where I'm more energetic and I'll have days when I'm lazier, but I push myself to go out and train anyway. And I can show up in totally different ways for my dogs, and I can see reflected back to me that the way that they show up changes too. So, the ideas of consistency. And then you also talked about working at home, which I love because there are a lot of people out there. Like some people can get, if you have a certain kind of dog, you can train them on the weekends, or like one day a week, and you can go out there and get them a title. And there are
Yeah.
some dogs, if you have a really biddable, really easygoing dog with, enough drive, they may get to the highest levels, right? I mean, I've seen it happen, but a lot of dogs, you have to put in more than that. You can't just show up as a weekend warrior, if you
Yeah.
will. And so those are things like I don't know that you want to talk about them more, because I think
I can kind of elaborate on, because I think it kind of ties into to people that are getting into it. Like
yeah.
I think you brought up something that's making me think about this. So obviously there's different levels of dogs within the sport as well, and then there's different levels of people that are going to want to do the sport, whether it's how physically capable they are or how flexible they are to like adapting to the training, or how hungry they are for it, how much work they're willing to put in. And then I think you have to match those people with the right dog. Like I couldn't imagine like a novice person having narwhal right now. Like I wouldn't have been prepared to have him as a dog if I would have got him as my first Malinois. Like I think I would have had a really great time. But with what I knew then, and definitely with what I didn't know, I could see where I would have made him way more than what he really needed to be, right? Like if every dog is a spectrum of possibility, I think with my skill at that time and what access I had to training, and then given the kind of dog he was, I don't think that combination would have been ideal. Like we would have been happy, but I think I wouldn't have gotten exactly where I would have wanted to be with him. And I think there's something to like a more novice person having a more novice dog, like a greener dog, or maybe a dog that's not as extreme or is not as challenging to handle. And that way you could potentially be that weekend warrior, or you could be that person that can kind of work their way through, whatever. I don't want to say minimal training, but it's not every ounce of your being. Like I can't really take days off with Narwhal. Like I can in the sense that it's not like he's going to lose his mind. Like he's good that way, but things will sort of start to unravel, or things will get a little sloppier. Like I can tell if I take training out of the routine, getting back into it, those first couple sessions are always going to be a little more challenging. He's going to want to go, and I'm going to have to balance it with the, hey buddy, like there's still breaks here, So I definitely feel like people that are getting into it should sort of see what they have access to first as like as a community, and then you can start to get an idea of what type of handler do you think you want to be within the sport? Like how bad do you think you want it? And I don't think there's anything wrong with sort of easing your way into it. We've taken a lot of people that are they're just regular pet dog people that sort of got bit by the bug and then transitioned into sport training, and now they're several years in, and now they're feeling really competitive, and they sort of are thinking, maybe my dog isn't exactly what I would want, but it was the dog that they needed to sort of get them going in. Like I don't think people realize kind of what you said earlier. You also have to learn the sport as the person, and you have to learn how to maintain the dog on a weekly basis. And then you have to go and show up and train with people that can sort of kind of keep track of the overarching plan and sort of routine, right? To kind of keep you progressing forward. So I definitely think it's more than just getting like a good dog. Like you need to get a good dog for your situation and for how you actually want to participate.
Yeah, those are really, really excellent points. And it's interesting, like seeing sometimes people with their first dogs. I can think of a few people who have these really nice, intense dogs, and they were their first dogs for sport. And it's interesting, like, you know, with some of those people, you see the handler rise so fast to the challenge because they have to.
Yeah, yeah.
They just have a dog that's like makes them level up really, really fast. And then you see some teams where, you know, you got this really nice dog and a very, very novice handler, and the dog is just always outshining the handler.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting to see too. And, you know, like I have one person that I work with that I would say this is them. Like the dog, you know, to a degree has sort of like, you know, outshined her for a long time. But there came a point where it was like you now you have to catch up
Yeah.
because now your dog has matured, and now your dog now sees the difference in a
Yeah.
sense
Yeah. They're
between where you're.
keen.
Yeah, and so now the dog is like, well, now I know how powerful I am. And, you know, as a young dog, I wasn't sure. I thought I was, but now I know for certain. And so then that person, you know, is essentially forced to have to rise to the occasion and step up. So yeah, that's super interesting. Damn, I have a note right here that I can't even read. But I do want to talk about the maturity piece that you talked about with Cheddar, because that's another, you know, so at this point, I feel like I've been exposed to a lot of different Malinois. I'm not saying that this is the correct attitude, so I'm not encouraging this for anybody listening. But I feel like I've had enough experience, you know, raising different Malinois, competing with different dogs, that at this point, I feel there are things that I know that I don't want as a part of my journey, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
You know, my very first dog, like Remy for Mondio Ring, like he did the things, you know, he had a good time. But once we started to get into like level 2 decoy work, he was like, no, 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 this is not for me.
Mm.
And so now, just using that as an example, I look more at young dogs and I say, if there's conflict, if there's a specific kind of conflict in the bite work that I believe at maturity will turn into stress about decoy pressure, then that's something I'm probably going to back off of, because I did that. It was difficult. You know, you talked about the dogs that need to be built, and I agree from a decoy perspective. I love that. I love it. It's so much fun. But I don't want that at this point for dogs that I take on for competition. At the same time, I've seen, like, Stasia for me is a really good example of a dog that, as a young dog, you know, I'm sure I've told you this because we've talked so much, but for those listening, like when I walked Stasia out onto the field as a young dog, it was like parting the seas. Everybody moved as far away as possible. That bitch was crazy. Okay. Like, she was a nut. I mean, we saw some crazy things, right? And there were points, you know, as she was growing up. I mean, people definitely told me, like, if she was with anyone else, she would have been euthanized. Like, just because, and it's like kind of like arousal to bite, right? That was her thing. She is not a mean dog. But she can get super spun up about things really fast. And funny enough, like, it doesn't show as much on the field, which I think is hilarious. But you know, and then for her, that winding up turns into a bite. And so it took me some time to convince her, you have to look for a toy when you feel like that. Like, you have to go for a toy. You can't go for the people around you. But you know, there were points where people were like, she's never going to be in control. And, you know, and I think a number of things that you're having to do with Narwhal, for sure. I had to do with Stasia. There was a lot of having to be consistent, having to work on it at home and in different environments, and, you know, teaching these little pieces. But actually, I think the crux of the change just happened with maturity. She learned how to balance herself better and handle herself better. She became more capable of handling that level of arousal that she still goes there, don't get me wrong. She definitely, like she definitely still goes there, but it's very different. And I watch her all the time and I'm like, I just love the way this dog has matured. Like, I'm so in love with the way that she has matured. So I do want to talk about that too, just because you do have a lot of experience with different kinds of dogs. And some of the dogs that you've worked with, maybe like Cheddar or maybe a little bit different, but they started off more sensitive, maybe, or requiring more building. And that works too. Like, working on the building absolutely works and it makes a difference. But there's sometimes where the maturity really makes the bigger difference. And I'm curious how many times you've seen that where, just maturity alone has shifted so much in a dog.
Yeah.
And,
I
it,
Go
it's a
ahead.
tricky question because a lot of times it's all of the things, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
It's
of
not
course.
usually just one thing, but, I think it'd be interesting to chat about a bit.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's kind of what you said. The truth is, it's definitely a little bit of everything. And I think if there's anything that I've come to realize with sensitive dogs is the way that you work them matters from their perspective, right? Like, we could have the best intention of thinking that we're doing things to raise their thresholds, but all we're doing is sort of agitating this bruise over and over and over again. And then it manifests itself as this like bigger problem. So I think as long as you have a good plan on how you want to address, like, maybe it's not an overarching problem, but maybe it's like one aspect of your bite work. Like, let's say a bigger concept would be like an issue with the stick. Like, that would be a pretty big problem. Like, I would say that would be something at this point, although I feel really comfortable getting dogs through it to an extent, because every dog, they're going to have their limit on if it's either not going to bother them at all anymore or it's going to come up in certain places. Those would land in the categories of things that I don't super want as part of my journey or for the people that I work with. Like, I think that's sort of like a bare minimum for me at this point, to be tolerant of the very basic pressure pieces.
Sure.
But I do feel like there are dogs that I've seen that were really sensitive or noticed those things as puppies, that as long as it wasn't brought into the picture in like a really averse way or like an overt way, like it wasn't super in their face all the time, it was just sort of always in the background, I saw that they would get better, but it always felt like this like kind of scary thing in the background. And so although when they got older, you could see that they brought like a lot of intensity and you could see them not have that issue with other stressors. There were always these like little undertones of stick problems or just issues with the person that they were biting. Like, they would notice a change in the person or, these like really subtle things. And I do feel like in that respect, sticking to potentially even like one person and kind of working one or two people to kind of work your dog through that time to allow the maturity to happen. And that way you can assess like what was the actual issue, because you could think you're working on the problem with multiple people, but from your dog's perspective, the change in the person is enough for them to notice and create a problem. So I'd say give your dog time, choose like one or two people to sort of get through your foundation and then see what the maturity does to it, while being very intentional about incrementally getting them over those stressors. And then I feel like I have a new philosophy. Like, before, my thoughts on more sensitive dogs were to be very strategic and very incremental and give more time. Like, oh, let them be older before you start to show these things. And what I started to realize was, even though they were getting older, I'm still risking, like, this dog is too old for this thing to still be a maybe. So then I was trying to figure out how to split the difference, because what happens if somebody's investing their time in a dog and they're two now, but I, as the decoy, or the person's taking their dog to a decoy, they don't know for sure if the dog is going to be able to handle a trial picture, basically, like, hey, you're going to bite somebody you've potentially never seen before, and the hope is that that you're fine with it. I started to feel kind of uncomfortable thinking that I could potentially be working with this team and not really know if the dog actually was going to be okay. So I thought, how can I shorten my timeline but also be very mindful about maturity? And so my philosophy became, how can I take the things that they're afraid of and just teach them as different signals, like signals to bite or signals to counter or respond. I go, if this thing, like, we'll just say the stick as the example. If the stick and the bite work represents an issue, then my job now is not just to neutralize it, but actually make it mean something else. And that way they have something to kind of fall back on. Like, it's not just the decoy's weapon or a form of opposition. Like, these things could actually be signals of opportunities for you. Like, hey, this pressure could mean that you get to bite more, or that the relief of pressure is coming. So I started to try to find compromises that would allow maturity to happen, but very quickly also get a better idea of, like, hey, like, is this dog going to be what you want it to be from a competitive standpoint?
Absolutely. I love that you just talked about that, because one of the things that I noticed that a particular decoy was doing with Remy, he was using the stick as praise.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things, though, that I had to watch and pick up on. It
Right.
wasn't, it takes, I think that there are a lot of people out there that can do good work. And then there are people that can do good work and be able to explain it.
Yeah.
And so, that's an added skill. I think that you have a great way of being able to explain what you're doing, not just to the dog, but to the humans. And that was one thing that I was watching, and I'm like, Remy's responding to the pressure with this particular decoy so differently. And then as I watched it, I was like, oh, that's what's happening. And I was very, very new to decoying. Lisa had basically just said, like, put a suit on. I'll talk you through it. Put a suit on. I'll teach you what to do. And so there was a lot of stuff that I was becoming familiar with, but it was difficult, as somebody who was new to sports and new to decoying, to just take my dog who was sensitive, so to be a new handler with a sensitive dog, and to go to these decoys that, I don't know them, they don't know me, and they're not really explaining much. They're not really telling me what's happening. So I had to develop a very, very, very good eye for watching everything. And I think that actually, what was initially something that was really frustrating turned into, I think, one of my greatest benefits. Because that turned into an asset of being able to watch the dog, to watch the decoy, to think about being a handler. There were so many little moments. Like, I remember one time the decoy said, okay, send the dog. I sent the dog, but he had the sleeve turned the wrong way. And so Remy's biting, but he's biting on the Velcro side of the sleeve. And so I'm there as a new handler, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, right? So everybody's like, hey, call your dog, call your dog. I'm like, how do I call my dog? It's like, like, just that experience as being somebody new, but I don't know, just, yeah, it's this is kind of going, to a different place, but I appreciate that about you, is what I was getting at, is your ability to, to explain, like, this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and this is my intention. Because I think a lot of decoys are really good at explaining things to the dogs. I've noticed that many, many, many times. And then the humans feel really frustrated because they're like, well, my dog either did great or didn't do great, but either way, I don't understand what happened.
Yeah.
And so and I think that's a tricky thing for women. Like, I was, thinking about this podcast and women with decoys, and how sometimes it can sort of be like taking your car to the mechanic as a,
Sure.
not, and I'm and not making an assumption that women don't know anything about automobiles, but I think traditionally, right, like men are mechanics and women may not know as much about cars or repairs. And so that feeling of like, someone's talking and saying something that I don't really understand, um, women can have that same experience with decoys.
Yeah.
And so while I initially wanted to talk about some more of the things that you mentioned, I kind of now want to jump into talking about decoying, because you are a decoy. I First of all, why don't you tell us like just how you got into decoying?
So I was a pet dog trainer in Southern California, and I was really enjoying it. I wanted to just learn more advanced training, whatever that was in my mind at the time. And that's where, I got on YouTube, and I was just trying to see what more was out there besides, just pet dog training. And I saw some obedience things. I didn't even really know what I was looking at, some agility, and I was like, that just didn't really seem what I wanted to go for. And then I started seeing videos of protection work, mostly at the time Schutzhund, and I had seen very sparing like footage of ring sport videos, and I thought that it would be cool, but mostly to participate. Like I had no thoughts on decoying at that time. And then I was doing a couple of local like mentorships with other pet dog trainers, and one guy was like, oh, do you want to put a sleeve on? And he would send his Malinois, I'd run, and I had a Schutzen sleeve on, and I would do these little catches, and it's like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like I was into it, and I kind of just wanted to know the nuances of the bite work, mostly just out of interest. And so I attended the Michael Ellis School in 2014, and one of the classes was the decoy clinic, and that was the first time I had actually put like a full like bite suit on. And I'm I'm not a tall human at all. I'm 5'2" on a good day. I was wearing suits that were made for men that were 6'2", and just running around, just getting smashed by dogs and not really being able to stand up. And, I kind of looked at it from a humor standpoint, but then I kind of like wanted to not fall. Like that was sort of my goal. Is like, okay, what if I didn't fall? And I actually tried a little bit more, and I got a little more into it. I was able to wear a suit that fit me a little bit better, and I was able to do catches that I wasn't able to do before. And I just thought like, wow, okay, like, I kept being encouraged like, oh, it's just mechanics, and it's about leverage and not brute strength. Because especially back then, I mean, I was in my early 20s. I wasn't really strong, and I just thought, okay, like, maybe I can do it in like a small capacity. Like I could maybe just help, right? Like the community that I was in at the time, the main sport is mondioring, that requires 2 decoys for the defensive handler exercise. So I was always, willing to volunteer and sort of be that second decoy. And then it sort of became, well, you could do the defenses and catches and some of these things, or help with the object guard. So the cool thing about coming into like a Mondio community was they needed a second person. So there was generally always like one like good like decoy, and then someone who was willing to kind of be in the suit. And I just kept volunteering, and my goal was to do a good enough job that if I volunteered again, people wouldn't be upset by that. And especially at the time, I didn't have a Malinois. I just had my Craigslist Pitbull thing, Moose. So he bites. Like we were doing some stuff, but I didn't really have a dog to participate in any of the seminars that I was going to. So I would just kind of volunteer as the second decoy. And when those traveling decoys would come, I'd go to the seminar and just kind of be the second person and try to learn as much as I could and sort of practice and work with dogs that I didn't really get to see, because I had sort of decided on getting my own suit because my partner was trying to do bite work with her dog. So I thought, okay, like if I have the the basics, I can at minimum maintain the dog until like a traveling decoy could come. So I would work with her. And then other people little by little would ask like, oh, like, can I do the same thing? Like, can I work with you? Like, can I practice? Like, can I do these things? And I was like, okay, like, you know, I can do these things. And then when the seminars would come again, I would go and I would just sort of follow whatever decoy was there and ask like as many questions as I could. Or, you know, again, I wasn't working a dog, so any downtime they had, I'd be like, hey, can you watch this video? Like, am I doing this right? Like, can I try? And for a while, when my partner would take her dog, I would also get in the suit and get a little bit, like just a little bit of coaching on some of the reps. That way she could work with, you know, whatever decoy. And then I would get a few reps of supervision and things like that. And then I met my very good friend, Joe Sinante, and he's actually been a huge help. And Fernando Dosta. Shout out to Fernando. He's always kind of been the original intro to French ring decoy work for myself and my partner Sarah. But Joe Sinante was a big part of me being able to kind of do the bite work and then send him the videos so he could watch them. And he sort of had a different eye. So obviously I came from the Michael Ellis school and I had, you know, a foundation in how I was going to approach bite work. And so it was nice to kind of have different eyes to give me different feedback and to sort of push me to be more and to ask more of the dogs and to sort of do more physically and to try to move like faster, or how I could compromise certain things. Like if I needed to work on accessories or scoops, but the dog was a bit stronger or faster than me. And, you know, I've always prioritized, we talk about this, I've always prioritized protection more than mobility. So I've always worn heavier suits that don't allow me to move as much. So I started to ask him about strategies that I could do of like either tying the dogs to things or covering my arms with things to just sort of make the pictures harder for them. But that way I could sort of compensate for my lack of skill at the time, but still kind of communicate those pictures. And then, you know, little by little, I sort of kept doing it. And then one day I was like, I think I can do this better than I was doing it before. And then, you know, before you know it, it's like 10 years later and I'm still doing it.
Nice. What do you think, where do you think there's value in having women be decoys?
I definitely feel like there's a difference in the general approach to decoying, I think, between men and women as just a generalization. Like, I think a lot of men have a tendency to come into it as it's me versus the dog, which has its place. Like, absolutely, that has to happen. There needs to come a time where it's not just a game, like it's a little more like combative or harder. There's like more pressure or more mojo, for lack of a better word. I think women in general have more skill in like nurturing the dog emotionally, like how the dog feels when they're doing the stuff matters. And I think those little nuance, like together, I think that makes a really complete program. I think dogs absolutely need to be tested and brought out of sort of that like handheld like puppyhood into like, okay, this stuff gets a little bit harder and gets a little more challenging, but also kind of preparing the dog appropriately emotionally and making sure that you're taking into consideration the dog at their various stages of development. And I think women are going to come into these things a little less driven and motivated perhaps by ego. Like, again, this is just sort of as an observation, as just someone that's been kind of in the community for a while. I think decoys in general, especially, we used to make a joke about this working at the school. When the long-term students were there, you would see a shift in the personalities when the guys would do the decoy class. And versus when like the women would do the decoy class. Like you could see the women almost like just amazed that they could do it, like just sort of proud of themselves that they could do it, versus the men were like, oh yeah, like I'm doing these things with dogs. And again, like not everybody's like that, but just, you know, having been there for several years, it's just sort of the tendency of the way that things go. So I think also from a handler perspective, I think it's also nicer for women to be able to work with another female, like especially if they feel a little intimidated, like having the decoy be a female and the handler be a female. I think the dynamic and the communication, the flow, like I think the decoy is going to be a little more thoughtful and considerate of the handler's feelings as well, and kind of how the overall flow of the session is going to go. And there's men out there that absolutely are capable of doing just that. But I think, just as a generalization, I think women bring a lot of softness into the community in that way that I think would be really beneficial for the dogs as well as just other handlers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the nurturing element and empathy, I think there's a little bit more vulnerability too. I think that women generally feel more comfortable to be vulnerable, though that's not a rule either. Some women, I actually have had a friend of mine that's like, I hate vulnerability. Like, okay. But but I think that those things, like, it part of it goes back to like the whole mechanic idea for me. I remember in the last city that I lived in, there was a really popular mechanic, and they were all like, everybody there was women. It was women owned and operated, and it was so popular I could never get an appointment there. And I was like, I bet you like most of their clients are women that, they just want to feel like they can be comfortable, have a conversation, and have somebody that's going to talk to them in a way that doesn't make them feel stupid or shitty, or, whatever it might be. And not that all, men that decoy are like that as well. But I know for me, with my journey, the way that I started decoying was because Lisa was like, okay, you want to do ring sport, so we're going to do this. And so she started taking me around to different decoys. And she would come in and say, and a lot of people didn't know who she was, and they didn't know that she had experience, and she knew what she was looking at and all of this stuff. So she would say, okay, this is my dog, and I would like to ask. And she was very, Lisa was Lisa, right? But she understood when I'm talking to a male decoy that I don't know, like, I'm going to come from this place of like, I'd really like to ask that you do this, this, and this. I've seen these problems with my dog, and I'd really, like to like not exacerbate them, kind of thing. And she would be really like pretty humble about it. And anyone that knows Lisa knows that she was not known for being humble.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wow.
Yeah, so she kind of knew, like, stepping into those spaces, that that's the way that she would have to present, and she did it. And then nobody would listen to her, time and time and time again. And she had a couple people like blow up dogs that she had. She had some people just like straight like shrug her off with this sort of attitude of like, who the fuck are you? Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And so we literally just exhausted all the decoys that we could find at that time, and in the area that we were looking. And she was like, just buy a suit and I'll just teach you how to do it. And that's the way that I got into decoying.
That's awesome. I relate to that though. I do feel like after leaving the school and sort of realizing how difficult it was to do Mondio, being that I was the other decoy, like I can't be a handler if you are the other decoy. Like I sort of was like, okay, like that's the appealing thing about French ring, is there only needs to be one decoy, so my partner and I could sort of decoy for each other. But really that came to be because the people that we were working with, like, we were willing to not even be the decoy, but we could tell that we weren't enjoying the process in which we were working our dogs in. And I feel like we had enough knowledge to kind of know what we wanted, but we weren't really given the opportunity to be a participant in that. And it felt like sort of like that, like who are you to tell me? And maybe it was also my immaturity at the time, didn't really understand why it couldn't be more collaborative. Like, why wouldn't you want to go on this journey with me if I'm suggesting that perhaps there's a different way to train this thing, that it's not even that I want to take over the training. It's just, I don't necessarily want my dog to go through training that I don't feel like is necessary, that it would potentially be more clear. So I think after sort of kind of butting heads with the people that we were trying to work with at the time, like you said, like, we're a really small community. I couldn't really do that. And then kind of having the motivation just to go, well, maybe we can kind of figure this out on our own. And perhaps that's why our journey has been so different, because it's not just about being a handler and going to a training group and sort of being told what to do and doing that program. We then kind of took it upon ourselves to not only learn how to be handlers, but also learn how to decoy. And then on top of that, learn how to put together like a real program that could be something, that could actually come together to be something. So I share that, like, sort of born out of necessity, like decoy born out of necessity. But I'm also kind of grateful, because I don't know if I would have appreciated the journey the same way had I just been a handler. Like, I think the training a little more intimately when you get to do the decoy side of it. So I think if there's an opportunity to learn how to decoy, even if you don't want to take it like maybe that far, I think everybody should do it to a certain extent.
Yeah. So this, I want to jump into to something there, because I think, for me, it is important to highlight throughout this podcast with everyone I talk to. I want to talk about, in what you do in your sphere, in your sport, in being a handler or being a decoy or whatever it may be, like, what is the value of having women there, a woman's perspective, a woman's attitude. And one of the things that you said was, you talked about in this group that you were trying to train with, you were butting heads. And so I'm going to share, and hopefully you're okay with this, because we did not talk about this ahead of time, but I'm going to share with everybody listening that, like, Jess and I, we had our own little, I wouldn't even call it butting heads. I don't think that we were butting heads, but definitely there were things that I was seeing in my dog that I was like, wait a second, this is different. And, so I brought it up to Jess. It wasn't like an easy conversation, I don't think. I think it was difficult for me to bring up. It was probably difficult for you to hear and respond to, but it wasn't butting heads. We actually, like, it was one of the most collaborative conversations I've been able to have with any decoy that I've worked with. Like, it was, I think that if I was having that conversation with a man, because I have had men tell me, like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't have enough experience. I've been doing this forever. Like, why do you pay me? And, and you don't want to hear what I have to say. Like, I've heard all those things. And some of those have been directed at me and some have been directed at other women, but I've been standing next to them. It's very much in my nature to, if I hear something like that, it does not make me feel small. Like, it makes me feel huge. And I'm
Yeah.
like, if someone comes at me like that, or even if they go at a friend of mine or a woman, I don't even have to know her. Like, if someone goes at a woman like that, we're going to be in a battle,
Yeah.
So it was actually really refreshing to have had that experience with you and be able to collaborate and just talk and tweak things and be like, okay, so we're going to change stuff up.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't agree on the approach to every single thing, but that's what collaboration is not just agreeing on everything. Collaboration is being able to have those conversations, to talk about where do we meet and where don't we meet, and being okay with both.
Yeah.
And then figuring out how can we work together despite that. And I, just listening to you and, like, thinking back to those conversations we had about Stasia, I actually am like, I think that's the first time I've been able to do that, actually.
And the thing is, it's like, I love that, because, okay, like, Our dynamic, I think, is really unique in that you are also a decoy. So I also respect that you can see things, and I'm comfortable. Something that I try to bring into everything that I do is that this whole thing is like not about me, the individual, at all. Like I really do believe that my role here is to be a vessel for information or access to something. Like my
Mhm.
job is to help support that. And I think as a decoy, although I could have a plan that I want to execute in my mind, like I reserve absolute control for that in like my own dog. And
Mhm.
then I try to
Yeah.
be open when I work with other people. So especially with people that, like, taking it back to you, like I really trust what you're saying because I know what you're looking at and I also know what you're looking for. And you know your dog better than I do, but I can also come in and go, okay, I think if we walk down this road, these are the possibilities. So as long as you know what's possible, I'm totally down to go. We can do that, but I
Right.
think these things could happen. And then I enjoy that you can bring in and then say, well, like I know my dog, so I don't think this could happen, that could happen, but actually also this thing could happen. So I think that's where real change can happen, because if you know the dog best and I have an idea, but maybe I have a separate set of experiences that I go, hey, I feel like
Mm.
I've seen this thing that we want to work on play out like this, or I have opinions about how preparing for this or what happens when we open this door. But I really feel like that is the fun part. Like I think that's the opportunity for you to potentially say something to me that's going to make me think about something that I hadn't before. And I think when you can separate feeling the need to know everything and to not be proven incorrect, you can actually explore some really interesting things.
Mm.
Like I have learned more by just listening than I have trying to impose my thoughts on someone. And there's many times where I find it interesting if someone chooses to do something different than me, because now I get to have that experience at your expense. Like I don't have to
Mm.
try it.
Sure.
Now I can sort of explore that with you, but I'm here to help you gain your vision. Like as a decoy, I think because I started as like I'm going to help. I've sort of maintained that. Like I want to help give you the picture that you want, so I'm willing to take your feedback, but I will definitely tell you like what I think,
Mhm.
but I don't think that's going to put me in a position where now like my ego is involved.
Yeah.
Like I can have thoughts and go, we should do that. Or okay, like I trust you, but I'm suspicious. Like, or there's been many times where you and I have been talking and I'm like, I don't like it. Like I don't like it, but let's try it. Or, I think having that dynamic with someone is really powerful, because I think you can actually explore some interesting things.
Yeah. I love that. Like, just everything you said it at the end where it's, we get into that space where it's not about ego. You sort of broke it down before where it's like, being in that state mentally where it's like you don't have to be right. You don't have to prove yourself. And I think that when I work with you, I definitely don't feel any, like, I really don't. I feel like between us there's no ego. I think that we're both people that we try, like, and it's always a work in progress, right? Like, ego is very protective. We all have it for a reason. But I feel like we both work at, because we come from a place of helpfulness. And I think that, like, there's two things that I wrote down that I feel the reasons are some of the reasons. I think there's a lot of reasons that we get along really well. But I think two of the reasons are, like, both of us, we matched on that level in that we're both just trying to help people. There's no, like, there's a very strong intrinsic value, I think, in both of us, that when we help people, it just feels good.
Yeah.
And like, and that's it, and
Yeah.
it's a motivator. And I'm cool that that doesn't motivate everyone, but it definitely motivates me and it definitely motivates you. And I think the other place that we sort of meet is in our level of competition. So I've played sports my entire life. I have always been the least competitive athlete ever. like, and it's the same for me in dog sports. I've heard some interesting things that people have, like stories that people have made up about me, which are really interesting. Like, she's so competitive. I'm like, where the hell did you get that? I am like literally the least competitive person probably on the planet. And I
So
do want
funny.
to compete with myself. Like, I want to look at, my dogs, the dogs that I've raised and kept and trialed, but also the dogs that I've raised and placed who have continued on with other people. And I want to look at, like, from Remy to Quest to Lexi to Stasia, like, how have I improved? Because I should be able to see from one training session to the next if I've gotten better. And I should be able to see from one dog to the next, like, am I improving? That's what matters to me. And that's what stands out to me. Like, am I just, and it's okay if I'm stagnant. Like, sometimes in life, that's where we're at, right? We're supposed to be stagnant. But like, in this realm, especially with sport dog training, we get to see so much about ourselves. And that's one thing that I'm always looking at. Like, is this, am I improving? And so I really like those are two things that you mentioned, and I feel like, yeah, those are the things that, like, we meet at those places, and I think it allows us to stay in a space when we train together that is not with ego.
Yeah, no, I feel like our training sessions have gone really well. Like I feel really grateful. I mean, obviously being a decoy, it's incredibly difficult to get your own dog worked.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're tired, you've spent the whole day working other people's dogs, and maybe you didn't get your dog worked right away. So then you're like, I could just skip it. And then you're sort of like, well, like, do I really want like my training decoys, like training my dog? Do I suit up for my dog? I'm
Mhm.
very
All
I'm
the
very
things.
lucky
Yeah.
that, my partner Sarah is also a decoy. Unfortunately, more recently she's been injured. So that was sort of the origin of the expansion of our relationship. It was like, how can I find someone to sort of work with me the way that I want to work,
Mm.
and we're both really lucky in that we're on very similar programs and we have very similar philosophies, I think, within the training, and the communication has gone really well. I feel you're very tolerant of like my tangents. Like I'll start to like I'm not a competitive person at all, but I am hyper obsessive about stuff that I get
Mm.
into. Like I don't into anything a little bit. I get into it a lot, which is probably where like just throwing on the suit and helping turned into like, no, I'm going to spend time like trying to get like good at this thing. And so it's fun when we train. You've helped me tremendously. I've had to rework some of my exercises, and you've been really tolerant of hearing me like flush through some of like my mental jumping jacks and kind of what I want, and being flexible and helping me like execute that vision. And I feel like that's really important to me. And I find that like when we train, like it's not like I'm on edge or nervous or worried or that I have something to prove to you. I can sort of go out there and do my thing, and then we can do the bite work and we can chat about it, or I can lean on you and say like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Or like, oh, does this look like it's getting better? And having kind of that soundboard is very, very valuable. And it's been a nice exchange. It's been nice to be able to train, and people can be challenging, and when you spend your valuable downtime with people, you want to make sure that time is well spent. And it's been so helpful, and it's been really fun. And it's been cool that we have known each other for a long time, but this is the first time we've really been like working together on like a very consistent basis. So it's also kind of cool to see how the dynamic sort of evolves, but it's been really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. really appreciated it. And actually, like, your hyper obsession, hyper obsessiveness has helped me too, because I'm actually the total opposite, right? And I think for me, it was great to start my ring sport career in Mondio ring, because Mondio allows for some sloppiness.
Oh,
And
it's
and
too much
so
for me to keep track of.
so, but for me, it's been very like, it's like Mondio ring obedience. It's like function, right? It's like it has to be functional. It has to hold up to the generalization. And and so, starting to work with you and Sarah, because you guys both share that a little bit. You like deep dive into, and it's not like you deep dive into an exercise, you deep dive into a portion of an exercise.
Yeah,
Right?
that's so
But
true. Oh my God.
but but for me, who's, like, just in talking about, like, in looking from one dog to the next, like, am I improving? It's like I look at Stasia, and and there's like I think our big area of challenge as far as the obedience has been positions. Not huge, definitely not like, like the challenges that I had with Remy. But when I look at, like, okay, I had issues with the positions with Remy, and I'm having issues with the positions with Stasia. They're minor. And so I can see, like, yes, growth has happened, but there's still a part of me, because it's just reflected in my dogs, right? And it's reflected in my dogs and their performance. And so, there are parts of me that I'm like, I'm not putting enough attention into that. And that's why my dog is reflecting back to me this issue. It's the same with outs, right? Like, I had issues there with Remy for a different reason, but I'm having issues there with Stasia. It's for two different reasons, but the fact that I'm having a problem is the same, which just tells me, like, okay, Mahogany, this is reflecting something back about you that you're just not putting enough attention into. And it's interesting, because I will share this too. I think one of the things that I've, like, brushed off that you've told me, so it's like, I'll tell all the listeners, like, Jess in the beginning was like, you can, like, just pinpointed something that I hadn't seen, because one thing that even as a decoy, I send my dog down the field. If I send my dog 30 to 50 meters down the field, there's a lot of stuff I can't see, right? I can see, but I can't see. And so, I told Jess, this is a problem that I've been having, but no other decoys that I had worked with had told me exactly why we were experiencing the problem. And Jess was like, well, here's exactly why you're experiencing the problem. And she goes, well, you can work on this with toys. And I was like, no, 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 no. And I was like, it's not going to work. And I recognized it in myself. And I'm like, Mahogany, come on now. Like, you could work on this. But it's like, there's a little block, and I don't know where it's coming from, but there's like a little block, and I can see it. And so I've actually been, like, processing, like, what is this block? Because it actually really sucks to do a lot of work and a lot of training and go onto the field and then lose points for outs. Like, that's
Yeah.
not fun. It really
Yeah.
is not.
No, yeah.
And
Especially in ring sport where it's, expensive.
yeah, yeah. And so, and in French, in Mondio ring, there's actually a little bit more leeway. Like, you're still going to lose points for outs, but French ring expects some very, very swift outs. And so, like, running into that block, and having Jess be like, well, try this. And actually being like, nah. It's been super interesting. It actually, like, it took me a while, and I have, I legitimately have been working on it, because after a couple trials of losing, like, a significant number of points for outs, I'm like, okay, we're not going to go through this. But yeah, it's funny, like, and it just goes to show, like, there's two things I want to say. One is, I really hope that throughout the sports, more women develop these kinds of relationships, whether it's, between women, with women and men. If you're working with, primarily a male decoy, that's 100% fine. But aiming toward being able to have that kind of openness where you can say whatever, and that is not always the case with decoys that we work on. I think, Jess, you said something that's also interesting, in that when we work together, there is definitely an openness to what each other has to say, because we are both decoys. And so we do know, like, if I do something or move a certain way, I know that you saw it correctly. Like, you saw it for what it is. And if you call it out, then I'm like, yeah, you saw it for what it is, versus someone who's just stepping into the sport, honestly, or who's never taken bites from a dog. I might go, well, you didn't really see it for exactly what it was, and this is why I did it. And there might be a little bit more of a conversation that way. But so I think when you're new and stepping in, it's important to understand, like, there might be things that I didn't, that I missed, or that I didn't see the way that they were. So it's important to acknowledge that. But I think that we need to make space to be able to bring it up, and to say, and I have, there's one person that I work with that I really appreciate. Like, anything, it doesn't matter how big or small, if she doesn't understand it, she's going to be asking me about it. And she will ask me questions for days, like in person, sending me messages. Like, she wants to understand every single thing that happened. And I love that. Like, as a decoy, I have no issues, answering those questions, breaking things down, and even sometimes acknowledging, like, well, maybe I didn't do something like exactly the way that I should have. And then I can admit that and say, well, next time I'm going to make sure that we do it better. So I hope for those listening that work on creating that, because that's where I think, as far as handler decoy relationships go, I think that's one area that I have seen that we need a lot of growth. From traveling around and doing seminars, I get lots of people that I've worked with when I traveled, and I cut way back on travel after my car accident. And so I get a lot of people that are like, God, I wish I could come to California and work with you. Like, and they're sending me videos and they're asking me questions. And I'm like, but ask your decoy. And they don't feel comfortable doing that, or they felt like they got the brush off, or, what have you. So I'd love to see, women everywhere feeling good and comfortable to actually have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's how, like, I think handlers asking the decoy questions is how they can get involved, like, it's so hard to really know what bite work is if you've never done it. You don't know what you're really looking at. Like, it takes a lot of time to really develop an understanding of what's happening.
Yep.
And that understanding does change when you are the one actually doing the bite work. You learn a lot differently when you get to play the role of the decoy. And if there's people that either don't have that opportunity or that knowledge, I think opening up the dialogue, and I think decoy is also understanding that handler, like, you guys are all on the same team.
Yep.
Like, it's you, the dog, and the handler. And I find a lot of enjoyment with teams that I work with that I know they have no real interest in learning the bite work, but I see them trying to understand, like, what was supposed to happen. Like, what was I looking at in this video? And I enjoy it too, because I also get to talk about the thing that I really like. These are all the, I'm sure this happens all the time. Like, how many times have you been doing something with a dog and it happens in the bite work and you're like, oh my God, like, it's happening, but nobody else has an appreciation. Like, they don't see it. And you're like, oh my God, this amazing thing just happened. But nobody's really there to see it until you're kind of around another decoy and they're like, oh my God, that thing happened. You're like, yeah, you had the eyes to see it. So it's kind of exciting when you see the handlers also having some knowledge kind of in that. So some things that we've implemented are, I really like to watch back videos of myself decoying, because I'm kind of in a constant state of wanting to level up. Like, I've had this thing in my mind, maybe this past like 6 months, where my job now is to, I feel very comfortable with where I'm at with my skill. Like, I feel like I can definitely provide the help that people are asking of me. but I want to ask more of myself now. Like I find that I'm, the same way I'm looking at my dog, I want to apply those things to myself. Like I look at him and kind of tying it all into maturity. He's going to be 3. The training and his age are sort of hitting this nice like blend. Like he's leveling up. Like I really want to level up as a handler. I really want to level up as a decoy. And so the handlers, they film their bite work because, they want to watch their dog's progression. But I also want to go back and watch it. And that way I can kind of study back my own videos of like, like I didn't love this thing that I did, or, oh, I liked what I did here. Like, oh, I can't forget about this thing. And so I create shared albums with all the handlers so they can put their dog's videos in there, and then they can comment and ask questions. And then when I'm sitting there reviewing the videos for myself, I can also comment back and tell them, what I think. And because I'm in this state of sort of leveling up, I don't hide that from the teams that I work with. Like if I'm challenging, like right now I'm challenging myself to do my catches a little differently and modify them a little more, and cut the angle a little bit harder so I can take some of the impact out of the catches. Like I'm trying to get myself to do them in a different way. And I've let the handlers know, because it's also putting myself in a position where mistakes are going to happen on my end, where my timing's going to be a little off, or things are going to potentially happen because I'm working on something new for myself. But I don't hide that from them. I'm like, hey, like I'm doing something new. And if I mess up, I'm like, I messed up because of this reason. And then we're all sort of on the same page. And it's funny because we were talking about it as a group. And when the dog has success, you can hear like everybody that's there that day, like, yeah, because they know what's getting worked on. But then it also kind of happens the other way when they know I'm working on something and they see that I'm able to do it. You hear they're like, yeah, like, we're doing it. Like, I think there's something to kind of having that support together, like I'm not here to protect my ego and go, I do everything perfectly all the time. Like I'm like, like that one wasn't good. Like we have to do that again. Or, it's not like it happens chronically, but I think I'm also okay. Like I think it's advice for anyone getting into it. Like be okay not being good at something, even if it's just in that moment, whether you're very skilled and you're doing something new, or you're brand new and you're doing new things for the first time. I genuinely feel that the first step of being good at something is to suck at it at first, and then you get better at it, and you kind of keep going at it. But I think having that communication with the decoy and the handlers and the dogs is beneficial for everyone involved.
Yep. I love that. I actually was going to ask if you have anything like I've got, other notes and stuff. I think that we'll probably have to have a part 2 to this conversation, but like you've said, a lot of amazing things, and I appreciate that you shared, so much of your journey as a decoy, but also your journey with narwhal, because I think those are things that can really, really help people and give them ideas about, how to approach things, what kind of attitude to have, how we may need to break things down for dogs that are, maybe a little bit trickier to train in certain ways. But I am curious if you just have some general advice for, I would say, maybe women thinking about decoying or like stepping into decoying. What would you tell them?
I would say first and foremost, like, be gracious with yourself. Like you're putting yourself kind of out there in a way that's already really different. There's nothing in this life that prepares you to do any of these movements, really. Like they're going to feel kind of funky and awkward. And especially if you're getting into ring, you're responsible for moving fluidly in multiple ways. Like you have to learn multiple catches and both sides of your body, different areas, all these things. Give yourself the time to kind of get adjusted and figure out systems that can kind of expedite your education, whether it's like if like hands-on is important for you, if theory is important, like try to expose yourself to those things as much as you can. And I think choosing a community that is going to make you feel comfortable and safe enough to do it and to really encourage you. Like I was taught by men, but none of the men that taught me how to decoy made me feel like I couldn't. They didn't make me
Yep.
feel like because I was a woman or because I was small and because I was outweighed by a lot of the dogs that like I couldn't do it. And I think I was the one that came into it with the mentality that I kept telling myself that I would get good for what I thought I could get good at, that I wouldn't be good enough, whatever that meant, to be like a real decoy, whatever that means, a real decoy. And I think if you don't put those limits on yourself and you keep going back to that community and you make real effort to get better and to put in the time and really try, like it, I am not naturally gifted at anything. Nothing. Anything that I'm remotely good at now, I have worked very, very hard to do. Like I genuinely don't feel like I have a lot of natural gifts. Like my mentality was, I don't want to be the reason why I didn't get an opportunity, that I tripped out on something mentally or physically. I didn't want to be the obstacle. So I just made sure that, if everybody else felt like I could do it, that I really should feel that for myself, that I should trust that it's okay for me to be out here and to at least even try. Nobody's out here really trying to make the sport grow or to be the decoy that everybody really needs right now, or be the stand-in while you're learning, while someone with more experience comes. Like there's a place for you no matter what. And I feel like if you're working with the right people, you will continue to get the practice that you need, and be comfortable also putting your limits, where if you go, hey, I don't want to go like level 10 aggro extreme, you don't have to do those things either. But I think find the things that you like and really keep trying. Like don't give up just because you're not good at it right away. Like it comes.
Nice. That's awesome. I want to touch on the community aspect, because what's unique about me and then you and Sarah is that we all had to create the community that we needed. And I hope that, across the country, around the world, wherever people are listening from, that there are communities that exist that people can step into and get the kind of support that they need. I know Jess, but last year I went to Canada for a women's decoy seminar. It was so much fun. Oh my gosh.
That's
It
so
was so
awesome.
much fun. Like seeing these, I think it was like, 15 women that were just so excited to decoy. And that's amazing because we don't have that many visual examples of women decoying. So if I
Yeah.
go anywhere in the country or in the world and I see that women are excited to decoy, I'm already like, I hate to be like, that's so courageous, but it really is, because it's
Yeah.
not like we have so many examples of women decoys. We're not seeing women decoys all over social media. We're not, and PSA is a little bit different. I'd say that's one sport
Mm-hmm.
where we're seeing a lot of women decoys and trial videos and training videos. But by and large, we see primarily men. Um, and I hope that there are a lot of communities where women are encouraged to decoy, and when they show up and say they want to decoy, that they're given opportunities. But if that community doesn't exist, I can say without a doubt that you can build that community, because Jess and I have built the communities that we needed and the communities that best supported the kind of environment that we needed to thrive. So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there before we wrap up. But Jess, is there anything else that you want to add? Again, like I only got to like 3 of my bullet points. So we definitely are going to end up having a part 2. But yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
I feel
know.
like we could talk forever. I'm like, I'm happy to jump on anytime. Like, I really
Yeah.
like what you're doing with all this, and definitely, I think it expands the community. You know, you're absolutely right. Like, there's like, it's not like I saw females decoying and was like, I can do that.
Mhm.
I was just like, well, no one's told me no, so I'm just gonna keep doing it because no one said to stop, or that I was doing it dangerously. And I feel like it would have been really fun to go to like an all women something, and it's not even like my greatest friend in the whole world is a guy, and I love him very much, and he's been a huge part of my decoying journey, and I think he's great, and he's never made me feel that way. However, I do feel like there's something really cool about, it's almost like women's sports. Like, it's not in your face a lot, and then you really get exposed to seeing professional female athletes, and you're like, man, like, this is just as action packed, or you're just as capable. Or I think honestly, Adrian Ray was probably the only female I actually had seen decoy, and it was at a PSA trial back in like 2014, 2015, something like that. I hadn't even really seen a female ring sport decoy. So I think being able to have those communities, and then also seeing women like really get out there and do it, is just, I think it's just really cool. Like, you know, I'm not the most like athletic or talented person on the planet. So I know that there's people that can get just as good or better than me if they just had access, because they have the physical capabilities, or they were very athletic, you know, or they're, I always make this joke, like, I've never had a problem being short until I decoyed. Like, what could I be like if I was a little taller, you know, or a little stronger? Like, you know, I don't know, but I think having more of that would be great. Like, I don't, especially if you're, you know, obviously there's extreme differences between trial decoys and training decoys. You know, if there's just risks to being a trial decoy, I think it's really cool. I don't think that's my role in this world. Like, I don't want to get hurt doing trials, but it would be really cool to see really talented, like very good female decoys, you know, doing trials. I heard that there's like an all female event in France. It's like, it's all female decoys and handlers. I think it's for French ring, but it'd be super cool to see that, or to see videos of that. Like, where are those decoys? What does that stuff look like? You know, I'd love to see more of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. You're gonna have to tell me a little bit more about that, because that sounds like something really fun to do.
I know. I'm like, I want to find out like when it is. I just kind of, we'll have to talk to Fernando about it. He brought it up one time and was like, "Oh yeah, they do this like all the time." So I'm like, "Okay, well, where? Like, who are
Yeah,
these people?"
seriously.
I'm
Seriously.
like, I want to see it. I think it's neat, and you
Yeah.
know, it would be cool to kind of pave a way. You know, like, you and I have talked so much about like even just stuff that we want to do, and we're like, "Oh, it'd be cool to do that together." Like, "Oh, it'd be cool to do it as like a women's thing." Like, it really isn't about not being around men. It's just also cool to see women doing non-traditional
Yeah.
female woman things, you know? Like, it's
Yes.
cool. It's just cool to kind of be around your people too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true. Like, it was so interesting you were talking about just seeing Adrian, and like having like she was the only like woman decoy that you saw at that time. That's so interesting, because even like the first, I don't know, several, like the first many decoy seminars I went to, I was the only woman, the
Wow.
only one. And now seeing like, full seminars of women who want to decoy and do leg catches, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think PSA is amazing in a lot of things that it has created. But like, to see women that are like, I'm gonna be a ring decoy, I'm gonna be a Mondio decoy.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just it's cool, and to see this, and to see women stepping up into this position and saying really strongly, like exactly what you said, Jess, like, I'm not gonna allow anything in my mind to stop me from having these opportunities or from doing something that I think would be fun.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Don't be the reason why you couldn't do something, like a lot of it is just up here.
Yeah. Yep. It totally is. Well, I have had a blast. I'm looking forward to part 2. I'm going to save my my other questions and things that I want to talk about because there's a lot. And like I said, I there's a lot of people I can get into long conversations with, but I think I've had routinely had the longest conversations with you. Like we didn't even talk today about conspiracy theories.
I know. I'm like now that I'm comfortable, I got the flow. I'm like, don't get me going.
I know. We haven't talked about calisthenics, which I did kind of want to
Oh
touch
my
on
God.
today. But we will jump into that next time for sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat anytime. Like I said, I really like what you're doing. It's always a pleasure to talk. We'll meet up and we've only got a couple dogs to work and somehow we spend the whole day and most of it is just talking and not always dog related. So, I'm really looking forward to seeing what other guests you have on and seeing kind of where this all goes.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to stop the recording here. And then we can wrap up off the recorded screen.
Sounds good.
Dope.